Kevin, in all your work, learning and the learner are at the center. We all know that schools are about learning. However, on a daily basis, it is sometimes difficult to keep our focus on learning. To keep our focus, it's very important to define what is learning.
Yes, it is. And that sounds simple. And once you understand what that means, it actually is relatively simple. But the learning business is a strange business, because you would think that with all the centuries of schooling, we would have worked out what our core business is. For me, the only purpose of schools is to improve learning for every student. Everything else is a support for that, but the central focus is every child learns optimally. Every child reaches their potential. Every child leaves this school, leaves Avenor, with a conceptual framework that enables them to make sense of the world they're going into, and maybe help that world make more sense. And I just have always worked on very simple epiphanies. Hard to make learning happen if you haven't defined it, and yet it seems to have taken our profession forever to realize that you can't make learning happen unless you've defined it. But more specifically, I think we have to define it as a process, because I now see people writing definitions of learning that honestly are fairly worthless, because nobody's worked out how the learning will drive the whole system, I think systemically. So what we need to define is very specifically the learning process. So the question that's guiding that work is not how much do we value learning, or why is learning important? It's much more specific. It's what's happening when we're learning. So that was the question that drove our research when we created the Common Ground. What's happening when we're learning? And we were very common sense about it. Some people call us the Common Sense Collaborative. We said, well, let's look at what expert learners do. And all of our research, particularly a compendium of research called How People Learn, it's a Princeton University Press publication, said that experts are experts in the ideas of their field and how they relate to each other. So we said, so we need to do ideas work. So we need to create people who are good with conceptual understanding, deep, long-term conceptual understanding. And then we said, but experts are also highly skilled, so we need to build competency. And then a much more value-based judgment was, and we really these days, always in the history of humanity, we've needed people with good values and high moral standards and high ethical standards. So we need experts in character learning, people with strong, positive moral character. So our definition of learning emerged from that understanding that at Avenor, we're creating learning experts. They need to leave the school as experts. So an expert is a person with deep conceptual understanding of ideas that matter, high levels of competency in key skills, and strong, positive moral character. To make it simpler, good with ideas, good with skills, and good people. So that gives you a simple vision then. We will always bear in mind that Avenorians would be good with ideas, good with skills, good people. Well, that means we have to be good with ideas, good with skills, good people. You can't expect students to become young individuals with high moral standards if what they see around them is people without high moral standards. So you then build the whole system around the notion of learning as a process. One thing to add though, because one of my favorite questions is, so what? We said, having defined learning itself, we need to help teachers make that happen. So we then unpacked the learning processes. We said, to build ideas, we connect to prior knowledge, we construct a stronger theory based on new knowledge, new information that we provide in class, and we share it for the benefit of the whole class and to be critiqued and get feedback. So we connect, we construct, we contribute. You build a competency with a student, you need to show them what good looks like. Here's what good basketball dribbling looks like. Here's what a good persuasive argument looks like. Deconstruct it with them, work out where they stand against good, practice to close the gap. To build character, place children in authentic situations, conflicted ones sometimes, ambiguous ones, ask them to consider how to act. What is the right thing to do? Act on it, reflect on it. So we defined learning, but very specifically we defined the learning process. And then you embed that process in all the planning, all the learning modules, all the assessments. We're always assessing for growth in conceptual understanding, competency and character. Then you begin to have a system. The Scandinavians talk about the red thread, the thread that binds everything. So for me, the red thread, or one of the two perhaps, is a clear definition of the learning process. One final thought about that, it's not my thought, it comes from W. Edwards Deming. He transformed Japanese industry after the Second World War. He took his, he's American, he took his ideas to America. Nobody wanted to listen, he took them to Japan, which is why there are a lot of Toyotas on American streets. I've been to the factories in Japan where what he called total quality management is. Total quality management is still practiced. And he used to say, quality is everyone's responsibility. So everyone in the organization is focused on making learning happen. I work a lot, as you know, because we just did it with all employees, not just teachers. But his thought was, if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. And I just love that simplicity. So schools need to define what they're doing as a process, otherwise we don't know what we're doing. So I'm very process-oriented, and the key process is the learning process.